So welcome to another video, guys, and in this video I am going to be explaining how you can start out with dividend investing on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. So as you know, there are two primary ways that you make money through investing in stocks. You make money through capital gains and you make money through dividends. Dividends though will be the main focus of today's video. So if you've always wanted to get into dividend investing but you don't know how it works, how you can go about it, that is what we'll be covering in today's video. So remember, if you like the video, definitely go ahead and subscribe, like the content, feel free to share it out with anybody else that might be interested, and also feel free to comment your thoughts, your opinions, your questions in the comment section below. It is greatly appreciated, and as always, thank you for supporting the content. But without further ado, let's kind of get into it and talk about how you would get started with dividend investing, how it works, and some of the things you need to know, right? So first, what is a dividend? Well, a dividend is simply a disbursement of capital or cash to investors within a business. So when you purchase a stock or when you invest in a company, you become part shareholder within that business. And what that means is that some of the profits or some of the cash, the money that the business generates, is attributable to you as a shareholder. Just like how if you owned your own business after selling whatever products or service you have, you might choose to take some of that profit for yourself. It's the same thing with a company that you invest in. Now, how dividends work is that the board of directors for the company, they will meet and they will decide whether or not it is prudent to pay out a dividend, because not all times do they have the resources or the ability to pay a dividend, right? So the board of directors, they meet and they'll decide whether or not the company pays a dividend. Now, typically, what this will mean is that a notice will be posted to the Jamaica Stock Exchange to say, hey, the board of directors, they're going to meet on X day and they're going to decide whether or not to pay a dividend. Now, once they have their meeting and once they decide what they're going to do, a subsequent notice will then be posted to the Jamaica Stock Exchange so that you know essentially when the dividend is going to be paid and the key dates that are involved, which are usually the payment date, the ex-dividend date, and the record date. But we're going to get into all of that a bit later in the video, right? So kind of to backtrack now. So in order to start investing where you'd be able to make money from dividends, you first have to open an investment or a brokerage account. Now, luckily in Jamaica, there are 14 registered brokers that you can open an investment or a brokerage account with, and I'm going to put up the list on the screen right now so you can look at what those 14 are. But just to give you an example, you have NCB Capital Markets, JMMB Investments, Sagicor Investments, VM Wealth Management, Barita, Mayberry Investments, etc. Right? So there are quite a few different brokers you can choose from. So in order to get started with investing where you can make money from dividends, to start dividend investing, you first have to open an investment or a brokerage account with one of the 14 brokers that you see on the screen. Now, regardless of who your broker is, the requirements to open the account are going to be similar. You need a valid photo ID, your TRN, proof of address, proof of income, and whatever minimum balance is required to open the account. Some brokers, they do not have a minimum balance, meaning that you can essentially start with whatever amount of money that you have. Additionally, some brokers, you may be able to open your investment account online. So for example, I've made videos on my TikTok page. Follow us on TikTok if you aren't. But I've made videos on my TikTok page that show you how you can open an investment account online with NCB Capital Markets and JMMB Investments as two examples. So once you decide which broker you're going to open your investment account with, and you either open the account online or physically inside their branch, the next step at this point will be to, of course, buy the stock so that you can make money from dividends, right? So depending on your broker, you might use a different platform. So JMMB has the JMMB Moneyline website and app. NCB has the NCB Wealth Connect app, or you can use the NCB website or JTrader Pro. And then for a lot of other brokers, they just use JTrader Pro, right? So regardless of who your broker is or which platform that you use, you'll have access to essentially purchase the same stocks. Now, there are some stocks, some companies that are known more as dividend paying stocks, right? So ideally with dividends, you can either get it from ordinary shares or preference shares. Now, preference shares are kind of a mix between ordinary shares and fixed income investments like bonds, for example. So with a preference share, one of the big distinctions or differences between it and an ordinary share is that you have a guaranteed dividend. So for example, you might notice that there are some stocks on the Jamaica Stock Exchange where when you look at the ticker symbol or the name for the stock, there's like a number in it. So for example, Trans Jamaica Highway has ordinary shares, but there's also a TJH 8.0 share. And that 8.0 represents the dividend yield that you would get. So what that means is that if you invested $100,000 at IPO into that preference share, then on average you'd be getting $8,000 a year in dividends, because that's 8%, right? So preference shares are known more for their dividend play. And with a preference share, your dividend is guaranteed, whereas with an ordinary share, your dividend is not necessarily guaranteed, right? So those are some of the key distinctions. As well as preference shares, you don't get voting rights. With preference shares as well, you're higher up on the ladder. In the event that the business goes bankrupt, when they're liquidating, you're higher up on the ladder in terms of who would get back their money in the event that something like that happens, right? So those are some of the key distinctions between an ordinary share or preference share. But all of this is just to explain that you can get dividends from either ordinary shares or preference shares. It's just that with preference shares, it's guaranteed and you know what the dividend yield is. Whereas with ordinary shares, you know that the board of directors have to meet and they have to determine if it's prudent to pay a dividend based on where the company is, right? And that might be based on the profits they generate. That might be based on how much cash they have available. That might be based on whether or not they may choose to reinvest the money into the business instead. Because at the end of the day, they'll always try to do the thing that creates the most value for shareholders of the company, right? So once you identify your broker, like I said, you open your investment account, you sign up for the investment or brokerage platform, and you have access to it now. And then you fund the account, as in you put money into your investment account and you decide which dividend share to buy or dividend stock to buy. Then this is where now you're going to be able to start earning dividends once they're declared. And like I was mentioning before, there are some ordinary shares that are known more as dividend stocks, right? So for example, Trans Jamaica Highway, Carreras, SVL, Scotia Group, Jamaica, Dolphin Cove, just to name a few. These are seen as more dividend stocks because they have more frequent dividend payments. They have a higher dividend yield, meaning that the percentage return you get in terms of dividend relative to how much money you invest is higher. So for example, if a stock, you invest $100,000 in it, and for the year you get $10,000 in dividends, then you know that $10,000 is 10% of $100,000. So your dividend yield would be 10%, right? And of course, how much you get in dividends is based on how much money you have invested in the stock and how many units of stock that you have or how many shares you have, right? Because when a dividend is declared, it's per share. So for example, say they declare a dividend for $1 and you have 100 shares, you know you get $100. But if you have 1,000 shares, you get $1,000, and so on and so forth. So now we're going to get into what happens when the board of directors meet and they decide that they are going to pay a dividend. What can you expect? So what I'm going to use as an example is I'm going to use a Trans Jamaica Highway dividend declaration. I'm going to put it up on the screen too, so you can kind of read along and get an understanding. So this is the Trans Jamaica Highway TJH dividend declaration. It was posted to the Jamaica Stock Exchange's website on September 11, 2024 at 5:09 p.m. and it reads as follows, right? So please be advised that a meeting of the Board of Directors of Trans Jamaica Highway Limited held on September 11, 2024. The directors declared an interim dividend payment of JMD 0.0952 cents per share. So remember how I mentioned before that the dividend is per share. So it's depending on how many shares you have, you may get more or you may get less in dividends, right? So you know, if you have 100 shares and the dividend is $1, you get $100. If you have 1,000 shares, dividend is $1, you get $1,000. In this case, the dividend is 0.0952 cents per share. So you'd multiply that amount by how many shares you have to know how much you get in total in dividends. Anyways, let's continue with what the notice reads. So the payment will be made on October 24th, 2024 to shareholders on record as at the close of business on October 2nd, 2024. The ex-dividend date is October 2nd, 2024. And then it goes on to say, TGH encourages all our shareholders to send their banking mandates to the Jamaica Central Securities Depository Limited, JCSD, for a faster and more efficient payment, which we're going to go over the JCSD as well, because that is also important in this whole process. I just figured I'd leave it until after this notice to kind of explain that part, right? So if you notice, there are some key dates in this notice, right? So October 24th being the first date as the payment date, that's a key date. Other dates to note is the ex-dividend date and the record date, which you notice that both of those days are the same day, which is October 2nd. Now, before they would have been different days, but right now, the Jamaica Stock Exchange has optimized the transaction processing time to where it's T+1 or trading day +1, meaning that if you buy or sell a stock today, you're recognized as a shareholder or you're no longer a shareholder the next trading day after that, right? That's when it's registered to say that you no longer own the stock or that you now own the stock, right? So the most important date to note is this October 2nd date, because this is the day that you'd want to own the shares by or be a shareholder on record by in order to get the dividend payment. So in this case, because transaction processing time is T+1, you have to own the shares in Trans-Jamaica Highway one trading day before this day to qualify for the dividend. So in this case, since the record date and the ex-dividend date is October 2nd, you need to buy the Trans-Jamaica Highway shares as late as October 1st to show up as a shareholder on file by October 2nd to get the dividend. So regardless of whether or not you buy the stock on October 1st or you own the stock how much years before, you're still gonna get the dividend once you're a shareholder on file on October 2nd, right? Because that is the record date. So in this case, say for instance, I saw that Trans-Jamaica Highway declared this dividend and I decided that I want to get some of this money. I wanted to get the dividend. I could buy all my shares on the 1st of October. Say I want 100,000 shares. I might decide to say, all right, I'm going to buy 100,000 shares because I want to get $9,520 in dividends. Because if you multiply the 100,000 by the 0.0952, you'd get around $9,520 in dividends, and that of course is before tax, which tax is 15% on dividends, right? But for some shares, you actually don't pay any taxes because they're domiciled in other areas. But we'll talk about that in a bit, right? So say I decided I wanted to buy 100,000 shares of Trans-Jamaica Highway. I could buy those 100,000 shares on October 1st, the latest, October 1st, 2024. And I would still qualify to get the dividend once it pays on October 24th, 2024, because I would have been a shareholder on file by October 2nd, seeing as I bought the shares on October 1st and transaction processing time is T+1. So that is extremely important to note. So once you understand that fact, you can even make short-term plays where you jump into a stock just to get a dividend, for example. And then once you're lock in the dividend, once you're a shareholder on file on the 2nd, then anytime after the 2nd now, so from the 3rd onwards, you could sell the stock and you would still get the dividend, because on the 2nd, when they check who the shareholders were, you were a shareholder on file. So a lot of people exploit this. They might jump in one trading day before, so they're a shareholder on record by the record date. Then the next day after that, they sell the stock. So you can kind of finesse that to get both dividends and cap gains. Because you know that sometimes when companies declare a very good dividend, a lot of investors will look to flock to the stock. But not everybody is really aware of this fact, that this is something that they can do, or not everybody is as optimal or as good as kind of taking advantage of this. So you can kind of use that to your advantage. Now, one of the last things we'll kind of cover is the JCSD part. Now, the JCSD is the Jamaica Central Securities Depository, and they're basically the people that keep track of who own what stock, right? These are the people that keep records of everything that's going on, right? So this is important because you have to set up a dividend mandate in order to get your dividends. Now, if you don't have a dividend mandate set up, what will happen is that they will send you a check that you will receive in the mail, right? So you'd have to go to the post office, collect your check, and go deposit the check. But knowing most people when they just start out with investing, the dividends won't be a crazy amount, so sometimes it might cost you more to cash or deposit the check than what's on the check. So I always tell people to set up a dividend mandate, and you can set up a dividend mandate through the JCSD's website, because they have a website you can sign up for. If you're somebody that already uses JTrader Pro, it uses the same login credentials, and on this platform you can basically set up dividend mandates for free to pay into either your investment account or your banking account, whether check-ins or savings, or pay into a credit union account of your choice. The decision is really yours as to where you'd want the dividends to be paid. But I always tell people to set up a dividend mandate because, of course, you help the environment with using less paper, and then of course your payments are deposited directly to your account, so it's a lot more convenient, right? Some people like to get the checks still, where they can have it as like memorabilia and stuff like that, keep it around as memories. I don't mind getting it electronically because I can always view my warrants just the same through the JCSD's platform. But I made a video on TikTok. I'll add the video in this description that can show you how you can basically set up a dividend mandate online through the JCSD's platform for free. Usually though, once you're opening an investment account for the first time, normally the broker will help you to set up a dividend mandate as a part of that process, right? But just in the event that they do not, then you'd have to set up the dividend mandate through the JCSD's platform. But I know with previous brokers, which I use 5 different ones now, they always help you to set up a mandate as a part of the process. Some might even charge you like a fee, like $200 or so to do it. But you can do it for free on the JCSD's website if you really wanted to. But basically, that's all there really is to dividend investing. That's how you get started with it. That's how dividends work, how you can set it up to get your payments, everything. So hopefully this video was helpful and useful to you. If it was, definitely leave a like. Share the video out. Remember, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to us. Help us to get to 1,000 subscribers. I appreciate the support as always, and thank you for watching the video again.